So I have a live Facebook event coming up, and I mentioned this a couple videos ago. It's with a friend of mine who does a podcast on intuition and living intuitively, Victoria Shaw. And so I mentioned this a while back, but I'll give you the specific links as it comes up. But it looks like it's going to be August 16th, 12 Eastern Standard Time. So many of you have been super cool in terms of comments and questions and just checking out these videos. And so it would be really interesting to see what might happen during a live event. So I will post that and we'll see where that goes. So as far as when we talk about my spiritual practices or any individual spiritual practices, again, it's kind of an ironic thing because, of course, what is spirituality? Well, spirituality is, and this is the simplest definition I have, is spirituality is being in reality. And it doesn't matter if it's meditation, mindfulness, or any other of the practices that one associates with being spiritual. You could reduce all of those down to one simple idea. Well, it's not an idea, it's a practice. And that is getting in touch with actual reality rather than thinking about it. And of course, that's why you can't bring you into the spiritual practice, because you as a concept, you as an identity are all thoughts about reality rather than actually being part of the living, breathing process of reality. Just like the Zen teacher who will come in and, everyone's talking, going back and forth with symbols, and the Zen teacher just claps their hands really loud, and just there's that brief moment where everyone is awake and alert, but they're not thinking anymore. They're actually in reality rather than thinking about it. And that's why I've spent so many of the last couple of videos talking about the dream of thinking, that being caught up in the thinking mind and not even recognizing that you're lost in a world of symbols is like a dream state. And we talk about the phrase the Buddha, which simply means to be awake. What are you awake from? You are awake from the dream of thinking. So when I teach my mindfulness class, and I go through so many different methods of practice, from mindfulness to meditation to all the different types of breathing to Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and body scanning was super popular. But underneath all of them is the very basic practice of being in reality rather than thinking about reality. And that I used to, of course, I was really huge in Tai Chi, and I always practiced Qigong, which is really just a simpler version of Tai Chi. Never was good at sitting meditation, and that's why I like giving kind of a buffet, because then you get to go and pick and choose, and I do think different practices work different with different people, and it's good to explore and find which one really clicks for you. And so because Tai Chi was moving, it really worked better for me. But when I say worked, well, what does that mean? Well, any spiritual practice works if it gets you out of your thinking mind, because that is the whole purpose. And so rather than focus on any particular practice, what I do, again, it's a weird phrase, what I do to un-I is to simply catch the moments when I'm not thinking, catch those. And there's a real feeling difference between experiencing reality as it is rather than thinking about it. And it's really difficult, I think, particularly being a college professor, anyone who's caught up in being an intellectual, and that's particularly difficult for those types, because so much is praised and valued when it comes to the thinking process. And now all of a sudden it's like your whole world flips 180 when you realize thinking is a useful tool, but it's really, really limited in its usefulness. So one of the practices that may be helpful, and it really helped me, is to learn when a thought is useful. And so if you're cutting the grass and you're just ruminating, or you're fantasizing about how you think the world should be, all that is completely useless. Some thoughts are useful, and you can ask yourself that exact question. The thought you're having, what purpose does it serve? Is it going to get towards some kind of goal? And if it isn't, then it's best to get out of it, bring it back to the real world. And of course, that's why the mindfulness movement is so big right now. All mindfulness, and again, it's a really odd phrase because it should not be mindfulness. It's really getting out of your mind and getting into the real world. And when you get into the real world, then you discover there are no real problems. And I'm not talking about something like physical pain or something like, if you're absolutely broke and you have nothing to eat, one could easily identify that as an actual problem that needs to be solved. And then the thinking mind actually could be very useful. If you remember Kohler's chimps, there's a banana hanging on the ceiling, and the mind went to work and it put the boxes, stacked them up, and then the chimp climbed the boxes, got the banana, and got some food. And that's really the blessing and wonderful stuff that the thinking mind is useful for. And so if you're starving, the thinking mind might put together some plan in order to get food. But the chimps, at the moment they ate their bananas, went right back to that dominant mode of non-thinking. And when you can get that groove going for a while, it changes things so substantially. I don't know. I do know people who claim that sensation is a permanent one. For me, it's never been permanent. It's more like a wave that comes and goes. But when you're riding the wave, it really is. And I'm just giving you words, so don't get caught up in the symbols. We have to use some way to describe it. But when you turn down the thinking mind, when you get into reality rather than thinking about it, it's the closest I've come to feeling the presence of God, to feeling the aliveness of nature. And that's what I was talking about in the last video, that things that look dead, things that look lifeless, the reason they look lifeless to you is because the thinking mind is creating an image of what it thinks is out there. And that image itself is dead and lifeless. But reality has a vibration. It has a palpable sense of being alive. And to feel that is all about getting in that groove of not thinking. And so for me, when I talk about, okay, what spiritual practice do I do? It's not tied in with any particular practice. If you call it a practice at all, it's a practice of under all these manifestations, which one gets me at the non-thinking state of non-mind?